Hello, and welcome to Joy of Stationery. This is Jennifer, and I wanted to begin actually just by thanking everyone for such lovely comments and the lovely support as I, share some of the things that I really enjoy on this channel. And I'm glad to have a number of you with me and to kind of enjoy the journey together. So what I have for you today is part 2 of my mid-year Techo Kaigi or planner meeting slash mid-year review of the different notebooks and techos that I used in the first half of the year up until this moment. And as I mentioned in my previous video, there are a lot of things that I'm including here because I did kind of allow myself the first half of the year to really experiment with different kinds of techos and planners and notebooks and journals to see how they might work for me. And as I mentioned last time, fortunately, I think that it's sort of led me to figuring out a little bit more about what works for me and what I might need in a setup, and also what I might kind of want, right, to keep track of and to make sure that I have for things like my creativity and my reflection in terms of journaling, things like that, in addition to some of the major planning that actually I need to do on a daily basis. So what I have here for you is, this is sort of Act 2. So if Act 1 was the 2023 lineup that I began the year with, right, moving from December into January, and I do want to make a quick caveat that I did forget one notebook, or to include one notebook, but I'll be bringing that in a little bit later anyway. So if Act 1 was my first kind of original lineup for 2023, Act 2 would be what for me was a kind of mid-semester pivot. So somewhere around February, March, particularly with kind of dealing with so many different transitions, so many new things, there were ways in which I realized, certain techos, as I mentioned, weren't working for me, and certain systems weren't quite in place yet. And this was my attempt to get some of that situated again. I'll begin with these two, which were my planners, or what I was hoping would kind of replace my planning system, and then go into this, which was an attempt to kind of get into the journaling. Let me just quickly flag here first this beautiful, beautiful sticker by Tiff from Talksmot. She has an Etsy shop, I think called Platinum Flora, and I'll link that down below, but she created these really, really beautiful pen nib stickers for 2023, and I had placed it here as a way to flag that I had very high hopes for this particular notebook, but I'll get into that a little bit later. So as I mentioned, I wanted to begin with these two because these were the two that I brought in kind of as this mid-semester pivot in the hopes that it would help me with what I felt was missing or what I felt like wasn't quite in place with my planning setup, especially again for the new job and for kind of all the new responsibilities that I was suddenly faced with. In a sense, whereas I began the year with the Midori Hibino, these two were kind of were meant to be kind of the replacement to the Hibino. And so this is the Hobonichi HON, which they came out with for the first time in their 2023 release. This is the hardcover version of what is their kind of original A6 Techo. But honestly, I think that I'd been watching different videos about the HON, and I did see on, I believe it's Ingrid Eilis's channel, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, that she had gotten one of these and sort of showed how striking the cover was in person, and just kind of sold me on it. So I decided, you know what? Why not? It's the year that I want, that I might kind of experiment and try out different things. It's the first time that they had released this product, the HON. Why not give it a shot? And I am really glad that I did get this. I do think it is such a striking cover in person, even more than I think in the pictures. I do really love that 2023 is sort of stamped in the Japanese characters, and the same goes for the spine as well, which is in this kind of striking red. And I felt like it would be just such a nice book for archiving purposes, just to kind of have this visible. You can see that I've also kind of added a couple of cute charms to the bookmarks, just to make the bookmarks feel a little bit more substantial, and help me kind of keep track of things where they were. So my plans for the HON were, again, to use for the purposes that the Midori Hibino was for. So, keeping track in my monthlies of different appointments and things. And you can see that did work really well here. I had started developing a kind of highlighter system as well, different colors to kind of stand for different categories in my life, both in my life and kind of work-wise, professionally. And I did find that this was really good in terms of kind of a go-to for that purpose. And because I was having trouble with the way that the Hibino had 2 pages per day, and it was feeling a little bit overwhelming to kind of fill out in that way, along with the much smaller grid. Here, this was a day per page that I was familiar with, and as you can see, because it's the same as their kind of A6 original Techo, we've got kind of this timeline on one side and kind of a flexible space on the kind of a right-hand column. And I was inspired, I think at first actually, to use this similarly to the way that Helen from the Coffee Monsters company uses her cousin, which is to say, to kind of use maybe the timeline for tasks, as well as, appointments and meetings, and then using the right-hand side for a kind of journaling for the day. And I will say that it actually worked out really well for a while. I think this was in some ways just what I was kind of needing for the kind of pivotal point of the semester. And then eventually I fell a little bit out of it, and I'll speak a little bit more to why. But I am slowly returning to this for a slightly different purpose. But I think it's because I do find that the Hobonichi A6 works really well for me. And again, I am really glad that I ended up getting this. And I'm really curious to see if Hobonichi ends up releasing kind of new designs for the HON this year. Hopefully it was a successful enough project for them that they'll continue it. We'll see. But I certainly am really glad that I did end up getting this and trying it out. So if I was using the daily pages in the HON for the, sometimes time blocking, but also kind of schedules, mostly schedules, right? Scheduling kind of things, and journaling on the right-hand side of the the right-hand column, I was hoping to kind of pair it with this beautiful Take a Note A6 planner as a way to keep track of all the tasks that I have. So basically, because I wasn't using the right-hand side or the right-hand column for tasks, I just didn't have enough room to keep track of all the various tasks that I had and that I had to keep track of. So this is the A6, and I think they call it the mini version of the Take a Note planner. And again, as part of the mid-semester pivot, I decided to try this out, and I think this is such a beautiful design. The cover is just this really kind of beautifully textured gray sort of card material, and what I thought was really beautiful and striking inside was the way that this planner uses a gray and a brown ink together in just such a beautifully clean layout. Just to quickly show you what the kind of weekly or daily pages look like. I was also interested in this format because it was so different from what I had tried out before. So the way that the planner seems to be set up is a kind of weekly setup, but the week spans actually 2 spreads here, and begins with kind of a quick little weekly overview here. The first 3 days of the week, so Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, and then you turn the page to Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And this is kind of a layout that was really appealing for some reasons, was also challenging for other reasons, just because, you know, I wasn't used to kind of having to flip a page for the rest of the week. But well, on the whole, for the purposes of this video, I'll just say that I did try it for tasks, but it wasn't quite working out for me in the same way. I think there was something about trying to divide my attention between these two that made it harder for me. So what I started to do instead was I started to try to use this as a hobby tracking journal. And so, for example, there are certain games that I like to play, as well as certain kinds of crafting hobbies like crocheting, and certain patterns that I was working with. And what I would do was I would kind of log, you know, for example, which row I was on, and, you know, kind of parts of the pattern that I was working on over the course of a number of days or a number of weeks, and then also kind of logging this particular game and, you know, how I was doing on that day's game, and I'll speak more to that maybe in a future video. Maybe what's sad about it is that I fell off of it mostly because I just got so busy, and I think a lot of kind of work-related and kind of learning curve-related things were so overwhelming and challenging that I just ended up not having, or finding that I wasn't making time for my hobbies anymore, which was really sad. But so that was actually the reason that I had fallen out of this. But as I'll speak to later on, I'm trying step by step, now that I'm kind of grounded in my One Book July setup. I'm finding that it's helping me, you know, finding that it's given me the capacity in my mind to start thinking about what are some ways that I can just little by little bring in some of these other techos to address the things that you know, I still have a need for or still have a desire for. So I do still have hopes for this, even though kind of mid-semester it worked for a little bit, and then I ended up kind of falling out of it. But still, you know, both really, really beautiful planners that I'm really glad to have experimented with, and, you know, to be seen how they sort of continue beyond July. Hello again. So, having spoken a little bit about my planning needs and how that went through this mid-semester pivot, I wanted to speak also about what this particular pivot in, again, kind of February, March, meant in terms of my journaling needs. So in my first in the first part of this video series, whatever you want to call it, I had mentioned how I had started the year with this, again, really, really beautiful Paper Blanks journal with a lot of hopes for using it as a kind of, long-form journaling. As you can see, I haven't used it. And what I ended up kind of moving to instead was what I kind of showed at the beginning of this video, which is an A6 Stalogy, again, kind of graced by this sticker from Platinum Flora or tip from Toxmot. So what I was hoping would be the case in kind of replacing the paper blanks is having a notebook, first of all, which was no longer lined, but had a really nice grid. I'd been meaning to try out an A6 Stalogy for a while as well, and I believe this is sort of the full 365, is that what it's sort of called? But the sort of the full year version rather than the half year, just because I did, I did kind of like the chunkiness of this particular A6 notebook. And I will say that I was inspired in terms of this new journal setup by Caitlin Gray's really kind of elegantly simple setup. And I have this, or I also got this really, really lovely Superior Labor cover in the dark brown, or maybe it's just called brown, and it's beautiful, right? And this fits kind of perfectly in there, and I did kind of start off relatively okay. I kind of wanted to keep it simple without much decoration. I just kind of wanted a space to be able to kind of write out my thoughts, write out my emotions, things like that. And I wasn't able to quite keep up with it regularly. So you'll see, for example, I kind of changed up my style a little bit. I tried to inject more stickers, inject a little bit more joy and life into it at some point to kind of get myself back into it. But ultimately, I think, I did get a little bit further in this particular journal than I did in the first one. But I think similarly to what I was talking about with the Take a Note planner, where because it became a hobbies planner and because the sort of semester itself became really overwhelming in certain ways. And this is also due to some long-term illness that I have as well, that was kind of just making it challenging to juggle everything and sort of juggle all the newness. I found that along with my hobbies, a kind of journaling habit also fell by the wayside. And, I just didn't really have the energy or capacity to kind of reach for this and pick it up again. That's also not to say that it could change. And again, this kind of speaks to what the process sort of was like. But, there were things that I liked about this, the A6 Stalogy, and I would like to experiment a little bit more with it as a journal. And so hopefully in the coming months, I'll be able to kind of get a sense of whether this could really work for me kind of in the future. So, again, another example of something that didn't end up quite working out for that particular time period, right? Just a few months ago, but, potentially with the promise that as I settle into my system, this is something that I might be able to kind of bring back. And this actually brings me to the next sort of stage. What I'm potentially referring to as sort of Act 3 in my process. So if Act 2 was sort of that mid-semester pivot, I would say that Act 3 sort of consisted of the promise of the Spring Start Techos coming out. So this idea of a kind of Spring Start refresh that I'll go over. Hello, so here we are with Act 3. This is around end of March, early April, and the coming of all the spring start techos from various brands. I was very much someone who couldn't resist the appeal of that, and part of the reason was also that I was looking forward to getting a new A6 Hobonichi A6 original in the spring start, precisely because my my prior experiment with that book as a kind of almost like a birthday book and then kind of covering a whole year was so was so successful, right? And again, this was something that I had carried over from 2022. It was something that was just so dear to me in terms of documenting, and I absolutely adored this piece mix cover from Hobonichi with various Perhonen fabrics that I wanted to continue the experiment in some ways. In this particular time around, I didn't end up sort of putting in my my kind of lottery participation, I guess, for the piece mix cover this time around, because I think for this year, what Hobonichi ended up having to do is to kind of take away the option for free shipping for the lottery items, unfortunately. And I totally understand that, but also, therefore, in terms of the extra cost that would kind of accrue, I decided instead to look for a different cover that I hoped would be representative of this year in some way or be really fitting. And so I decided on the Reflect cover, which was actually from the year prior. I think it was part of the 2022 lineup, and I hadn't gotten it at the time, but I felt like it was so fitting this year precisely because of what made it appealing to so many others, which is this beautiful brass button that features a little cat kind of looking at itself in the mirror. And this was the year that I got my beautiful kitty companion, my first time owning a cat, or having a cat for the first time. And as a way to kind of commemorate how much joy that he's brought into my life, I thought this might be kind of a perfect cover for a techo that's meant to kind of document the year starting with my birthday. So my first birthday, celebrating it with my beautiful kitty companion, and therefore using this April start. And yet, as much as it was such a success last year, this particular year, it's not quite taken off as much. I was doing pretty well in the beginning. You can see here, I did this for last year's Spring Start Techo as well, where I've decorated the front of the Techo book itself with these really beautiful transparent stickers from Show Little Happiness, and I absolutely love so many of her cute designs. And again, it was sort of off to a promising start where I was using the monthlies as a way to just kind of log a quick highlight, and it worked so well last year. And I could kind of look at a monthly page and get a sense of, oh my gosh, that's right, this is what kind of happened on each day of this month. And I had fun kind of decorating the dashboard for April, and then kind of getting started with what I was hoping could be more of like kind of aesthetic, artistic, kind of creative project. And I was having a lot of fun with stickers and kind of trying to figure out a way that I wanted to kind of work with everything, you know, using these cute little stickers. And then it got to the point where I was kind of mostly just sticking in ephemera, but not really finding the time to really kind of add much else. And so once again, it did kind of fall off. I mean, this is a little bit later on. And, you know, it almost became, probably because, again, of just having to juggle so much of the learning curve with the transition, and as well as kind of taking care of my health, sort of fell by the wayside, right, as a kind of creative endeavor that ended up starting to feel a little bit like a chore, or, you know, a drain on the energy. So I've not picked it up in some time. I occasionally, if I get some happy mail, I'll glue something in here. But, you know, it was initially kind of meant as a way to kind of, you know, have that spring start refresh that had actually also spilled into these other wonderful books. So here is what I had kind of shown just a moment ago, because what I ended up doing is sort of moving my journaling here into the Spring Start Hobonichi Weeks, which was this really lovely botanical cover. And I, you know, I would say that I'm still fairly new to Hobonichi. Like, I really got into Hobonichi, or, you know, first started using Hobonichi in 2021, you know, a little bit, you know, a little bit later than many others. And so because of that, I had kind of missed those years when the other botanical covers had been released. And when I see those covers, you know, looking back at, you know, videos and photos from others in the planner and stationery community who had those, I remember thinking like, oh my God, those are really, really beautiful. So when this one came out, I thought, oh my goodness, okay, you know, didn't know that they were going to release this in the spring, but I thought it would be really, really nice to have, even though I already had some other Hobonichi Weeks, but I wanted to do something different with this. And I was actually really inspired by Himawari Stationery on YouTube, and I'd sort of for a little while now been following with her really kind of wonderful collection of Hobonichi Weeks. I really love that that she collects them, because these designs are really cool, you know, from year to year, and the way that she is able to kind of use them to different purposes. And while I didn't necessarily take on kind of exactly what she ended up doing, which I might actually later on, I thought, you know what, maybe, you know, what would happen if I try to use the Hobonichi Weeks as a journal instead of a planner? So I will say that, you know, once again, I wanted to use Tiff's sticker here because it was so beautiful. And because I was, again, high hopes for the weeks. I will say that it actually started out quite well. You know, again, I wanted it to be a little bit more kind of, I guess it's somewhat long form, being able to kind of use the week to journal about that day and have some spillover on this side, and then more spillover kind of in the notes pages. What I tried to do, for example, here is, I think that I had found somewhere a prompt for 6 questions to reflect on, you know, Q1 of 2023. And so it was a way to kind of, you know, reflect and have that all together in this beautiful book, in this beautiful Techo. So I, you know, was doing pretty well with it for a little while. You know, I started to incorporate some decoration, and then, you know, once again, kind of fell out of things. And I think it's because I hadn't quite sort of mapped out or sort of planned out what kind of journal that I wanted this to be. And it might be that, you know, I had all these notebooks and they were all kind of competing for my attention. So what I think that I think I posted about this on Instagram, but I'm hoping actually to be able to make this, you know, kind of starting a little bit this month, but certainly kind of after July, making this more into a kind of museum and kind of wandering around and kind of traveling around my new city type of journal or memory keeper. And so this is kind of inspired by Himawari Stationery, who does use a Hobonichi Weeks as a kind of museum journal, and I think that's just such a wonderful idea. So, you know, fingers crossed, hopefully that'll work out for this, because, you know, again, I do think that the Weeks is so beautiful, and it does make me excited to think about, you know, what are some other creative uses for this beyond it being a kind of planner, since I've been addressing my planner needs in other ways. So we'll see about that, but, you know, once again, a kind of spring start refresh that that I couldn't resist. And the final, I guess, spring start refresh that I wanted to try out for a while is the Nolte. And so this is, oh gosh, I'm gonna have to look up the number. Maybe it's 1211. Nonetheless, you know, they do come out with the full calendar year, I think, you know, sometime in December or so, or ones that start in December as you lead into 2023. This one, however, was a spring start, and so they do release a spring start Techo, much like the way that Hobonichi does. And I thought, okay, you know, once again, kind of inspired by this idea that the spring might you know, bring a new start, help, you know, jumpstart certain kinds of things. And I've been wanting to try it for a while. I think that for the calendar year beginning in January, they do have 2 sizes, and so they are both pretty small, which I personally like. But this one, or I think the regular calendar year ones, they have a pocket size, which the spring start is, and then they have, I think, a smaller one, which is the passport size. I was kind of hoping that this was going to be a passport size, but it's not, but that's okay, because I really like the pocket size as well. And it looked like, at least from Amazon Japan, which is where I got this, that I think maybe the spring start Nolte was only available in the pocket size rather than passport. I could be wrong about that, but that was sort of what I was able to glean from what little I was able to kind of find out and understand. And this is something that, again, I had some high hopes for. It was the first time I've ever used a Nolte. It is just really, really nice. I mean, so many of these different Techos are just so beautifully made. The Nolte has a more cream color paper, but still a really kind of lovely kind of paper. They use a dark green ink, and so it was a different kind of feel that I was really excited to, you know, to try out. And, you know, I was kind of decorating this and thinking, like, okay, this will be another another start. So, you know, again, I think there was a way in which it started out as something really promising. You know, I was trying to get a feel for how I might best, you know, kind of use this. What you have on the left, for example, you know, is I believe it's called a Gantt chart. So it's a different way of figuring the time, the kind of schedule, right? The sort of timeline of the day in this particular weekly format. So, you know, I would kind of experiment with how to sort of use that, occasionally drawing like a little doodle just to kind of help me remember, and then using the right-hand side, you know, just for deco or other things that I wanted to kind of remember. And I think for me, just once again, I ended up falling out of it precisely because, you know, as I realized at this particular moment by the mid-year that, you know, I'd stretched myself too thin, right? There were too many Techos, too many notebooks kind of competing for my attention, you know, all of which could be really effective in helping me plan or kind of use for different, you know, for different reasons, different purposes. This I hoped could be a kind of EDC, everyday carry, since it was so wonderfully small and compact and so kind of elegant and sophisticated. But again, because each Techo had its own strengths, that would mean that I would need to kind of approach planning or journaling in a different way. And I was trying them all. You know, I just kind of fell out with, you know, so many of them because I hadn't quite figured out yet what was working for me. But this is really, really a really wonderful planner, and I did want to kind of show it, and I'm really glad that I was able to kind of experiment with it. I added the little, you know, Traveler's Cafe, Traveler's Biscuit kind of in the back here, and it comes with this address and memo insert as well. So I actually do, you know, I am kind of interested in potentially the future, in future years, seeing if I can work with this in some way as an everyday carry. But again, you know, we'll see. In any case, this was part of the, you know, of the kind of spring start Act 3, right? The spring start drama, and something that I just kind of wanted to try and see if it would work for me.